Would you like to use cardboard for your oil paintings, and have you wondered if you need to prime the cardboard with gesso first? Let's see. Hi everyone! I made a video about a year ago comparing painting on primed and unprimed cardboard with acrylics. Someone asked in the comments if anyone has tried painting on unprimed cardboard with oils. Well, I hadn't, but when I saw the comment I thought I need to try it. I used 2 pieces of the same type of cardboard, something that was thick enough to not be bendy and that was already cut in 2, since I realized I don't have a carpet knife right now to cut it. I primed 1 piece of cardboard by painting white acrylic gesso on it. You can use acrylic gesso under both acrylic and oil paintings. And you can also tone it by mixing in another acrylic paint if you don't want a bright white background. The gesso I use is Liquid X Basics. I've had this bottle for about 4 years and have used it a lot, and it's still not running out. I use this for max A4 size paintings or a lot smaller, like in this case though, so I don't need a lot of gesso for one painting. These are about 10.5 by 11.5 centimeters. All the supplies and paints I used are listed below if you are interested in any of them. I painted 2 coats of gesso on the cardboard and then let it dry for a while after each coat. The instructions say to let it dry for 24 hours, which I rarely do. More like 30 minutes to a few hours. I'll use one of the paintings for my niece's birthday card, and I wanted to paint canaries, so I sketched out 2 different poses in my sketchbook first and then onto each cardboard piece with a colored pencil. I searched for bird oil paintings online and pinned some that I liked the style of into a hidden Pinterest board. It doesn't have to be hidden, but I like to use hidden boards when I'm planning for a new painting. I'll show you some of the images and try to find the sources for each of them. I also had some of my own photos of canary birds, but those were not taken in good lighting and they were taken kind of far away because I didn't want to bother or scare the birds too much, and I used those to sketch the poses. I also searched for canary bird photos on Pixabay and Pexels, and finally just did a Google search, but I used those photos for getting the details right, like the eyes and the beak, since my own photos were just not clear enough for that. But I'm saying I used those in a way that it wouldn't be obvious that I used someone else's photo as a reference. It's just important to get some of those key details right, even if it isn't meant to be a realistic painting. The oil paints I used are Marie's water mixable oil color studio paints, and I used an old glass frame as a palette. As a disclaimer, I don't do much oil painting usually. I prefer acrylics and watercolors since they are faster for me. I hadn't touched my oil paints in a long time before this, and some of the paint tubes had leaked. It looks like the oil separated and came out. And when I opened the lid of the glass jar where I keep linseed oil, it smelled so bad and it had actually dried. The difference I can see right away in the paintings is that when the cardboard is not primed, it looks wet when painted on and it's soaking up the oil from the paint. The primed painting looks shiny and the unprimed one looks matte, so there's a different effect. The colors also appear brighter on the primed cardboard, but then again, that one has a white background and the other one has a cardboard brown background, so that accounts for some of the difference. I have been asked how about replacing the white gesso with white paint. Well, I don't have enough white oil paint to try that right now, but I can try it with white acrylic paint, so I'm keeping that video idea in mind. The unprimed painting might also look more muted because I was using the same brushes without cleaning them much in between, and they were getting dirtier and picking up more paint, and the shades were getting mixed and the colors turned out a bit more muted because of that. But I don't think that accounts for much of the differences between the paintings. After the first painting session, I left the paintings to dry, covered the glass frame palette with plastic wrap and cleaned the brushes with water and soap. The paints will stay wet on the palette for a while, so continuing the next day or even the day after that with the leftover paints is fine. And that's what I did. I finished the paintings the next day. I used the plastic wrap to slow down the drying and keep the dust away. As I said, I washed the brushes with soap and water, but they do still stain though. So if anyone has a suggestion on a non-toxic yet cheap way of cleaning them from water mixable oil paint, please tell me in the comments. I chose water mixable oil paints specifically so that I wouldn't need any solvents. I also have a set of traditional oil paints that I've never tried because I don't have a solvent to use with them, and I'm not interested in getting a toxic solvent or one that smells toxic anyway. So I'd like to know what the alternatives are that would be easily available. One of the brushes actually broke while I was painting. The head came off the handle. It was one of the brushes with a blue handle, and I think they're Grelando brushes from Lidl, just in case you're thinking of getting a set of those. I don't remember having this problem with them before though. The next day, both of the paintings are still wet and the primed painting still appears shiny. The problem with painting right to the edges is that I would constantly get blue paint on my hands when I had to keep the painting in place or switch between paintings, even though I tried to be careful. So using an easel would be best, but these paintings are too small for my easel. It's funny that I usually try to blend softly with acrylics, even though they don't naturally work like that, since they dry fast. They're more suitable for blocky colors. Whereas oils have a long drying time, so they're easy to blend, and yet I chose oils and a more abstracted style where I didn't want to blend much and ended up accidentally blending and mudding up the colors, because I didn't want to wait for the previous layers to dry. You can see the difference in the finished paintings clearer than in the earlier video where I compared acrylic paintings on primed and unprimed cardboard. In that video you could initially see how the acrylic paint soaked into the unprimed cardboard, but after more layers the outcomes look about the same. In this case though, there's a clear difference, at least while the oil paint is still wet. So if you prime the cardboard first, the outcome will be shiny, more like a painting on a primed canvas, but if you paint directly onto cardboard without priming, you get a matte, darker finish as the oil soaks into the cardboard. This is what I was expecting based on what I found online beforehand, but what was surprising to me is that the primed painting started bending, but the unprimed one didn't. So you might want to prime both sides to prevent the cardboard bending, or use a thinner coat of gesso than I did. I didn't dilute the gesso with water at all. Based on the amount of footage I have, it seems I used more time on the unprimed painting, and I felt like I had to add more layers, especially on the bird, because the coverage was bad. The paint just wasn't opaque on this surface. I let the paintings dry for a few days and show you what they look like after that, in case they'll change after drying more. Since the paints I used are water mixable oil paints, they dry faster than traditional oil paints. It depends on how much oil you add while painting though. I did not use much linseed oil. I did mix in some in the beginning, but realized it's resulting in a different look than I wanted, since it makes the paints translucent and I wanted thicker paints, and stopped using it, except to reactivate some of the dried paint on the palette. I also avoided using water to dilute the paint. I've made a video about water mixable oils before if you want to know more about how to use them. Just as with the acrylic cardboard painting video, I'll mention that you can do this whichever way you want, prime it first or don't prime it. The result is clearly different, so it depends on the outcome you want. But if you don't prime it, the painting will not last as long, since you don't have the primer protecting it. If you don't mind that it doesn't last and that you might end up using more paint than you would on a primed surface, and you like the matte effect of the painting on unprimed cardboard, then you don't need to prime it. For more art medium and art supply comparison videos and cardboard painting videos, click on the playlists or the videos on the screen. Thanks for watching. Bye!